Well, welcome back, folks. Today's episode is probably going to be a little shorter than my normal episode length. We're going to continue on with the installation of the front wheel assembly on the TS50 Gaucho project and get that done so we can get the bike up on its feet. It's quite a milestone, actually, getting the bike back up on its wheels. So we're going to complete that, and that's pretty academic. That won't take very long. And then we're going to do a little review of some of the zinc plating I've been doing on the side, some of the components that I've been preparing to eventually reassemble onto the frame of this project. So we're going to start with the front wheel assembly and mounting, and then we're going to move on to a little review of some of the zinc. See, I've already got the bike up on the stand. I got the front end propped up. You can see I did that there. Got a couple of straps just to hold the bike down onto the lift so nothing goes wrong and that falls over on me when I'm fiddling with the front wheel. I have the wheel already essentially in place. It's lined up, roughly lined up with the holes in the lower tubes of the forks. And on the opposite side, which you can't see obviously, the brake panel is already installed. So it's almost in position. You can see down here the hardware. That is the axle. That is the original axle that I replated. Might have talked about that before. And then a couple of other new pieces, the axle nut and then the cotter pin or split pin that secures the whole assembly. Very straightforward, very simple arrangement. I'm going to go ahead here and move around, and we're going to go and see if we can't get this all put together. You'll also notice the torque wrench laying there, and that's already set to 26 foot-pounds. I believe the front wheel nut torque on this assembly, I think it's 26 to 32 or 34 foot-pounds, so this is typical on my restorations. I usually torque to the low end of the spec. I am not going to use on this assembly any anti-seize. You could certainly if you wanted to, but I don't think it's going to be necessary for this. So I'm just going to put on the nut on the axle dry and then torque it in up to 26 foot-pounds. I've got the axle started, a little grease on the axle as I normally do. I'm going to tap it through with my hand. As you can see there, of course, the axle on the front wheel of this bike goes from left to right. There is no washer here, and then this spins on like that. Now we're going to go ahead and torque it in place. I'm going to put a little piece of plastic over the end of this nut. You've seen me do that before. That's just to protect that fresh zinc on that factory nut. I'm going to take a screwdriver and put it in the hole in the axle on the opposite side to hold that axle to prevent it from turning. And now we'll just torque this down. As simple as that. Now, see if we can get this split pin in. I might have to adjust that nut just a little bit. Yeah, it doesn't quite line up. So what we're going to do, since I have a little latitude on the torque, I'm on the low end, I'm going to go up just a little bit more and see if I can get that slot on that nut to line up real close right there. There. I think that should do it. There we go. That is a factory split pin, by the way. Now, I've talked about split pins before, or cotter pins, as they're usually called in North America. How to install them correctly, and the way I was taught is when I went to trade school years ago, I had a couple of years of auto mechanics way back when in high school. Didn't pursue it, but as a career, but I did have a couple of years of it. And they taught us in that school, that trade school, that the proper way to install a cotter pin or a split pin is to drop it through, like you see here, with a castellated nut. And then one leg gets bent up around the outside and the other leg gets bent against the flat of the nut. Sometimes you'll see people will take this, and let me reverse it here, and they'll take these legs and they'll bend them this way around the nut, which is incorrect. The proper way is, at least the way I was taught, and I'm going to do this with my fingers, like that, and then against the flat of the nut. Now I have to get a side cutters to clip that off because it's a little bit long, but that's essentially the way you would install, or should install, a split pin or a cotter pin. The bottom leg again is going to have to be cut off, but for all practical purposes now this front wheel is installed. I can take the bike and get it off the lift. I can move it forward into the wheel chock, and the little TS50 Gaucho is up on its feet. Again, that's quite a milestone. I'll give you a little close-up of how that cotter pin or split pin is installed right there. I think you can see that. That is the way I was taught in high school and trade school to properly install a cotter or split pin on a castellated nut. I'll give you an overall shot of the little Gaucho up on its feet on the stand. I got it secured so I can continue to work on it and move on with the rest of the assembly. Of course, there's a lot to do yet on this bike, a lot to do. So it'll be a while before we get this all done. And for those of you that like to look in the background to see what I've got in the shop, I know there's a lot of folks that do that. I do it myself in some videos. You can see up there on the bench. I'll be moving on to the wiring harness here in the next few videos or so. So you can see I've got the main harness up there. I've just started looking at that. It's in very good condition. And then over here, just to the left of it, I've got a project for my buddy Jim once again for one of his Harley Hummers. I've got to make 2 more of those chain adjuster brackets. I think I made 1 or 2 of those just about a year ago now, exactly. He's got another frame. He needs 2 more made, so I'll probably make 3 or 4 while I'm at it. And so he dropped off the raw stock for me to machine and then a drawing of the dimensions. So somewhere along the way here, fairly soon, I'm going to go ahead and get those pieces machined up for him. Whether I'll do a video on that or not, I don't know, because that'll be a duplicate of what I did a year or so ago, essentially. But we'll see. But anyway, back to the TS50. It's up on its feet, and we're ready to move on with other pieces of the reassembly. We're going to move over to the other bench here in just a second. We're going to take a look briefly at some of the zinc plating that I've been working on. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the zinc plating I've been doing recently, in between other things. These are all parts for the TS50, of course. They are all original. They came off this project. None of them were replaced. They were in pretty good condition overall, though most of them did show evidence of some pitting, minor surface rust, and the original zinc was gone on a few of the pieces in some places, but they all were salvaged quite successfully, I think. Starting at the top here is the brake rod that goes from the brake pedal, the rear brake pedal, to the brakes themselves. This is the brake stay arm for that same rear brake. This is I think this is the tool kit holder. I believe that's what that is, as far as I can tell, I recall. This is for the oil pump. It's just a bracket that the oil pump sits on. It this mounts into the frame, and then the oil tank sits on. And then there's a strap that comes around here that holds that oil tank, that old plastic tank, oil injection tank in place. And then this is the cover for the oil pump itself that's down near the countershaft or drive sprocket. All of these parts, I stripped the original zinc off with acid, cleaned them thoroughly. I don't think on any of these I media blasted them. I don't think I had to. They all went into a bath of evaporust just to make sure all the corrosion was removed, cleaned once again in clean acetone, and then they went into the zinc plating. And I've talked about zinc plating many, many times. There's a lot of videos out there on YouTube as well as I've done some videos on zinc plating, so this was not intended as a tutorial, but I rather want to share with you some of the work that's been going on in the background. Now when it comes to zinc plating odd shaped parts, such as this brake stay arm and this brake rod, one has to quite often get creative. And let me show you how I plated those parts, or the setup rather, for me plating of those parts. I thought I'd talk a little bit about how to plate odd-shaped parts, like these long, narrow parts like this brake stay arm and this brake rod. What I have used historically is pieces of PVC plastic pipe, like you can see here, available at any hardware store, home center. I have two different versions of this. I have one that's quite a bit longer and quite a bit bigger around, but they're both the same design. You know, they're sealed on each end with caps. They are watertight or liquid tight. They do not leak. You could also probably use gutter like you'd use on a home eave to divert water off, you know, from the rain off your eave so it doesn't get near your foundation. That'd be quite a bit larger in size, but it would work as long as it's plastic. I would not use the aluminum, to be honest with you, for something like this. I'd use plastic only. Never done it, but I think it could be made to work. Back to the PVC, again, just you can make it any length you want, any diameter you want. Seal it on the ends with these caps like you can see here so that the liquid doesn't run out, because this will be full of liquid. In terms of suspending of the part, let's talk about this stay arm a little bit. I use for this project two silicone plugs that are typically used for powder coating, and I just inserted, you know, one there and the other one here, and it acts as a standoff like you can see there, and then I can put it down into the channel. Took a piece of the rolled zinc, I've talked about that before multiple times, just made it into a channel, cut it on the end, you know, notched it out so I could bend a piece of it up and placed it into the channel like that, as you can see. Then I simply, after filling the channel with the solution, of course, for plating, then I can just take this part and I can suspend it like that and connect the electrodes, positive and negative. Now the way I connected the one electrode to this piece is I took a piece of copper wire, ran it down through this hole, held it in place, pushed the plug up through it, and essentially pinched it on the inside here, and then the wire came up and I could clip onto it. That's at this end, that's why I bent this up. You can see here and put a hole in it. I could take a piece of copper wire and twist it, pushed it through that hole, twist it, and then I could clip on with the other lead to the zinc anode. Again, this was just filled with water. Let me get this. I did, by the way, if you're wondering, I did take a clamp and clamp this on one end here, and had the clamp situated back in this direction just to hold this channel so it didn't want to roll on me. I didn't bother doing that for this demonstration or this conversation, but it did work. And then you just can plate away. In terms of the brake rod, not dissimilar. This rod has a hole in the end for the cotter pin or split pin. I just put a piece of copper wire and then twisted it up into a U so it came up like that. And then I could clip onto that with a cross rod, wrap the copper wire wrapped around the cross rod, and then that would be suspended like this on one end. And I just took a piece of copper wire at the other, up underneath the threaded portion here at this end with a crossbar, wrap the copper wire around that, and then I could suspend this brake rod something like that. On this end I can move that wire back and forth, that copper wire, to ensure even plating of the threaded portion here of the rod. So again, just a little creativity. You can come up with methods for plating odd shaped parts. Parts such as this are not near as challenging to plate. You can just suspend it like this into a container, a plastic container, and you can reverse it from time to time like that if you want. But this kind of part is not near as challenging to plate as something shaped like this. I think that's going to be it for the video today, folks. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.